And what a game. Game of the tournament, perhaps. World number one Ireland have taken down the reigning champion Springboks in a titanic pool stage affair in Paris. Matt Hansen and Cheslin Colby got the game's only tries in the low-scoring 13-8 contest. But this magnificent Irish side have taken France by storm, just like our fans, and just like Zombie by the Cranberries. Joining me this afternoon are three returnees to the podcast. We have a South African fan in our midst in the form of the returning Thala and Msutu. So welcome back on, Thala.
Okay, thanks for having me on. I took this invitation aware of the consequences and the risks of it.
Don't worry, we won't be too triumphant or anything. We'll be generous to you because you're good enough to come on. Because I understand I wouldn't like to be taking calls to come on to a podcast this morning if we'd lost by 5 points. And we have two happy but heavy-headed Irish heads as well alongside us in the form of David Cordial and Stephen Murphy. So welcome back on, lads.
Cheers. Good to be here, Cal.
Always good to have you. And I'll start with yourself, Stephen. An epic encounter last night. I was going to say David Grant for a big lie, but just a titanic tussle. What's your overall thoughts on the game at large?
Yeah, it was a fantastic game. It was a fantastic game to watch. I was watching it in a pub in Galway, hence the croaky voice and the slightly sore head today. But it was a game that was fit for the billing that was given to it. We had so many questions going into it from an Irish point of view because obviously we performed well against Romania and Tonga, but this was a whole different kettle of fish with South Africa. They're the team that scared me the most in the World Cup, just because of how physical they are and how dominant they can be. And we wanted to see what we could do in a World Cup. Look at Ireland been good for the last 2 years, but we have so much, we have so many demons when it comes to a World Cup. We would have not been surprised really if maybe a bad performance kind of snuck in there, but this team just doesn't seem to have that in them yet. Anyway, the mental strength that we saw last night, the back and forth between both teams, it was kind of everything you would want, especially in a low scoring game. We put 80 points in Romania and it wasn't a fraction as entertaining as a 5-point win over South Africa. But two incredible teams. I've seen a great thing going around today as well, and it should be commended as incredibly physical and hard hitting, but nothing illegal, no high shots, no TMO checks. It's rugby. It's modern rugby the way it should be and the way we want it to be. And it was just a great advertisement for the game.
And it was cup rugby at its finest in that regard, wasn't it? Like you had to be clinical, you had to be smart. And listen, he might get mocked, but I think all of us were here clapping like Ben Earl after every turnover and every penalty. It was one of those games. Thala, I understand. People might think, oh, South African mightn't be too happy to be here, but to your credit, you were very respectful of Ireland last night online, much to a bit of blowback about it. But it was a really entertaining game all the same. And I understand disappointing for South Africa, but it was a test of two very, very good teams.
Yeah, look, I think yesterday we had two of the best games in the World Cup with this game and the Georgia versus Portugal game. And the reason why this game was fantastic was, like Stephen was saying, this was a true test match, and it was a true, like almost a knockout type of atmosphere. I tweeted just before the game ended, I think in the last 10 minutes when the game was still in the balance, that look, there's enough, I think, for both sides to take positives from this. I don't see any other team but a France team, especially with Dupont, being able to reach this level of play. So if both teams are able to be, taking good decisions like they did in defense especially, and sharpen up one or two things, like there's nothing for them to fear if they face each other again, or if they face a team like France, or if New Zealand has a good day or whatever. So the quality of the game was great. There were so many good performances. A lot of the world-class or like top players in their positions all stood up. I mean, apart from obviously South Africans, it's a bit of a blue Monday for South African fans, like whenever the Boks lose and there's a bit of finger pointing, and I'm sure you're going to talk about some of the consequences for selection and everything. But in essence, there were things that were within the Springboks' control, and they didn't do that, and that's the reason why they lost.
Yeah, no, it's fair that soul searching was always going to be the case, no matter who came out on the wrong side. And even at that, like it's very easy to, if it was a 10-point win, to maybe say it, but like it was a one score game, in an unbelievable test match, as you said. And David, like, get your thoughts on it as well, because it was a game that, as myself and Steve were saying before we started, it seemed to resonate with an awful lot of people in this country. And we'll talk about the bigger picture later on. But it's kind of a shown that rugby at the moment, as much as anything else, in its purest form, is thoroughly enjoyable. And when you get a game like that between two of the best in the world, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it was a really titanic performance, not just from the two teams involved, but for the sport. I've watched it back twice now, I think, since shout out to our own Suzanne, who sorted me out with that recording. And it's really telling that for a match as low scoring as it was, it did not get less engaging on the rewatch. I think both teams, the thing that really stood out with the match was both teams put in incredible performances. This was not a show of over dominance from either side towards the other. They both played very well, and they both countered each other really well. So even though it didn't show on the scoreline, I thought both sides had a decent amount of flair and attack, and then just structured defense and scramble defense. Particularly in South Africa's case, I thought their scramble defense was incredible. Single score difference, nothing between the teams. 5 points this way, 5 points that way. That's two penalties or a single try, and it swings the opposite direction. So I think Ireland will come out of it very confident. I think it was a big match for them. Obviously, we don't want to peak too early in the pool stages, but I think they'll come out of this knowing that if they play to their game plan, there isn't a team that they can't beat. But on the flip side, I don't think South Africa will be overly concerned. It was a 5-point swing. A bounce of a ball is a difference in that situation. And coming up against France, possibly without Antoine Dupont, or against New Zealand, I think it'll probably be France now. I don't think there's any team that they will be afraid of facing in the tournament. And if we get to the final and these two teams meet again, the bounce of the ball could go the opposite direction. It could be a 5-point swing back in their favor. So I think both teams oddly will come out of this one fairly positive. Obviously, Ireland happy to get the win, but I don't think South Africa will be too worried coming out of this one.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, and it was that type of a game. And I suppose we get into kind of the main talking points or directions to lead the conversation in terms of looking back on the game. And Stephen, I'll start with you, because I don't know, I felt like set piece, and maybe we were just completely off the mark, but an awful lot of talk set piece was the Irish scrum, South African lineup, but ended up kind of being the other way around. Porter did a really good job in Malherbe. The Irish line out, I think they lost their first 4 and won their next 5 or something. It was a very shaky start for both Kelleher and for his jumpers as well, it should be said. And it kind of unfolded to be a game within a game, that set piece, because when you're playing South Africa, it's been the same for 20 years. When you're playing South Africa, you have to at least get parity at set piece time. And it wasn't easy, but it feels like Ireland just got there.
Yeah, look, I'm by no means a set piece expert, but it was clear that Ireland struggled off the bat. I think we lost the first 4 or 5, and it wasn't even like South Africa didn't steal all of them. Some of them were overthrown. They weren't even close at times. We were going for complicated throws. When again, Kelleher obviously confidence wasn't high, and look, there was question marks over Ireland's lineup coming into the World Cup. It was good in the Six Nations, but since then it's sort of been a bit flat at times. And amazingly enough, it didn't really cost us, which, again, another game or a place South Africa again, if that lineup's not working, you could get punished severely. The scrum seemed to go back and forth. South Africa would win a couple of penalties, then Ireland would hold their own. But what I was surprised by most was South Africa maybe choosing not to back their own line at a time, especially when we'll get to the kicks in a minute. But I would have thought they would have gone to the corner and try to impose their will. That's in that sense, which I was surprised by. Well, maybe it's a compliment towards Ireland, but the main question marks again coming out of that game now is what can Ireland do to maybe fix those line out issues, because South Africa have maybe done us a favour a little bit there, where they've exposed something that Farrell can now hopefully sink his teeth into over the next couple of weeks before getting to another quarter final against France or New Zealand. So It's look at set piece like that. It's very hard to build an attacking platform when your lineout's not operating well. We saw that last time with Ireland's attack. It looked pretty average at best at times. And that's because we had no attacking platform. And there's also the momentum that it just creates for the likes of South Africa. Like South Africa love messing up someone's line. Like they get such energy from that. And you can't give them easy wins like that. Again, we got lucky last night. It didn't cost us to win, but you can't be that sloppy again and think you're going to get away with it.
Yeah, no, you're bang on, because if that was like, say, like South Africa had a very good set piece, their kicks let them down. If they have a bad set piece against France, that could be that could, maybe not France, maybe New Zealand, depending on, but that could end up being costly. You don't know, and you have to kind of view it from that prism as well. Like it was good from Ireland that they problem solved and whatnot, but certainly had its shaky moments. Thala, just for your input on this, like certainly felt for me, lineout was okay. I felt like some of it was Ireland's jumps and just a bit of a timing issue. But to be fair, Mustard and Etzebeth just got up. They just got up in the air, put the pressure on. Scrummaging wise, then I thought Inche and Naikane really went after Ireland's scrum until maybe Beelum come on. I think Beelum did really well. What was your making of the set piece from your viewpoint?
Yeah, I think there's been a few gremlins in the Irish lineout for the last few weeks that have crept in for some reason. Apparently, this is the fourth game in this game since August that they've lost more than 4 or more lineouts, which is an issue. On the other hand, though, Ireland has close to 20 lineouts a game, so maybe it's not as much of an issue because they have a high ratio. But as Stephen said, there had to be a lot of plan Bs in terms of, okay, now Ireland was pretty much mostly throwing to the front or doing 5-man lineouts and not really being able to launch an attack from their lineout like they usually do. I think I can only think of the one lineout where they did have ball off the top, and then Van der Fleer carried quite well in the midfield. Most other lineouts they had to do maybe a little bit more conservative, like moves just off like a dummy maul and everything. So I think there's some things that they need to fix. Maybe it's just a matter of Dan Sheehan playing. I mean, we know that Dan Sheehan's lineout throwing accuracy is ridiculous. Apparently, he's only missed like 3 lineouts for Ireland in his whole career or something crazy like that. But also, South Africa has probably the best defensive lineout in the world with Mostert and Eben Etzebeth. They just, as you saw yesterday, just both jump as high as possible. So you need to get your timing right, and the throwing has to be great and everything. So I don't think it was, apart from, I think there was one skewed line out, I think everything else was more of a timing and accuracy issue than it was for solely on Ronan Kelleher. So there is things that they need to fix, and Polo Cordial, I'm sure, will fix it. So what's weird is that Ireland had a great line out pretty much before this World Cup part of the season. So it's just, it's a concern now, and it's just something that they have to fix. I was a bit surprised that once Ireland started going at the front, that South Africa didn't really compete. I just thought there was maybe an opportunity to really just almost go for the kill and just to be like, look, we're going to mess up each and every one of your lineouts, and just to really further emphasize. But yeah, again, maybe South Africa was a bit scared of the Irish drive or playing off the lineout, so they wanted as many defenders up and available as possible. So I think that was probably a reason for that. And then with the scrums, I think I've given Andrew Porter a lot of stick about his scrumming and that he doesn't scrum straight and all that sort of stuff. And he did really well. I think at least most of the scrums I saw from above, he seemed to be holding on straight and seemed to be putting Malherbe into a lot of difficulty, which there's not many loose heads in the world that can say that, at least in the last few years. So that was great. I think, though, if Ireland does play South Africa again, once Oxenchair comes on, Tug Furlong has to come off as soon as possible, because Furlong struggles with a shorter loose head, and Ox's thing, or the reason why Ox is such a good scrummager, is that he can get under the tight head. Now, the concern though on the South African side is I mean, the scrum went largely well. I mean, we can't expect that every scrum are going to get a scrum penalty, although I'm sure people on Twitter expect differently. But the question now is twofold. Is Malherbe's now had 2 games where he's had a few struggles with the loose head. Is that an issue or not? Number 2 is because people that know a lot more about scrum said that a part of the reason why we conceded that I think it was a free kick later in the game was Dion Fourie and sort of the timing and all that sort of stuff. So obviously, as we all know, the Springboks decided to select Andre Pollard as their second hooker. So what does that mean in terms of, okay, we have someone like Dion Fourie or Marco van Staden, they'll be scrumming there. What are we losing? Is it something that can be fixed? Because of course, I mean, Ireland, we're going to go up against a strong scrum. France, we're going to go up against a strong scrum if we go to the quarterfinals. So it's something that needs to be fixed quickly if we want to go further in this competition.
And France in Mavaka and Marchand have really tough scrummaging hookers as well. Like they are built like a brick wall in terms of they're square and they're very tough to get anything on. It was a great game. We won't just solely touch on negatives because the next part is what was, in my opinion, one of the finest displays that we've seen. In the modern game, you never see 2 12s going up against each other and having a real battle. But I thought Aki, who did get player of the match, and Damien de Allende, they were just phenomenal. Probably each other's best player, you could argue. And David, you watched it back, so you can probably tell me if I'm talking with a bit of hindsight bias or whatever, but certainly felt like this was a really good battle that shaped how Ireland laid down America, but as well South Africa in defence as well.
Yeah, they both had huge games. I think if you've been watching Ireland play recently, you wouldn't be surprised by Bundy's performance. He seems to be a man who's just timed his peak form at the perfect moment. He's just been, and obviously, against Romania and Tonga, all due respect to both of those sides, it wouldn't immediately be obvious that he was hitting those heights, but when he was able to continue it against a team as good as South Africa, it's a testament to the kind of form he's showing. And I think for him, the biggest thing is that he had this reputation as being a crash ball 12. He's big, he's physically strong, but I think now he's showing that he's all those things, and he's also incredibly fast. His breakaway for his try against was it Tonga? His first try was just the speed he was hitting. He was uncatchable. He had a break against South Africa in the first half, where you really thought he was on the verge of going all the way. And credit to, I think it was Colby and another player who managed to bring him down. Like that speed combined with I think he's become Ireland's best distributing 12. He can flip out these massive 30-meter passes, almost wing to wing, and that's led to tries for Ireland more times than I can count. So he's just been incredible. And then de Allende, I think I only noticed it on the rewatch. I think the first time I was watching, I was too caught up in the moment to really notice positive things about South Africa. But on the rewatches, my God, he had some impact. I mean, I know I was saying Bundy has a reputation as a crash ball 12. de Allende was running through Irish players for fun. I think there were at least 2. I think players who took a while getting back up after he was done with them, and it wasn't just like carrying strongly into contact. He was brushing guys off. He was bouncing through tackles. It was taking 2-3 attempts to bring him to ground. He was just incredible. He was in this, and to watch the 2 of them face off against each other, the same 2 12s just absolutely dominating the attacking form for their teams was incredibly impressive. And I think if either of them were up against anyone but the teams that they were up against today, the pair of them would have tries coming out of that game. So I think Bundy Aki, obviously for Ireland, absolutely massive, hitting his form at the right time, but Damien de Allende is doing the same for South Africa, and just incredible to watch the 2 of them face off in the one match.
Yeah, no, it was a true exhibition, and listen, Bundy is in the form of his life, but Damien de Allende has had to kick on another bit because Andreas Helsen has a really good pre-World Cup run of form, and to be fair to de Allende, he's just laid down another marker to show why he should be the starting 12. And Thala, I want to move back to South Africa now because kicking was always going to be one of the things that we highlighted. They only kicked the ball 20 times in open play, which is probably a little bit less than we would have expected. Kick smartly now doing that, it should be said. But an awful lot of the talk was on Libbok. You know, a lot of Irish fans would have seen the URC final, seen him fail to land a few kicks, and it's happened in games gone by as well for South Africa. And South Africa ended up leaving 11 points behind. And off the tee, two of them, granted, you know, Faf de Klerk's long range penalty, they end up scoring the try from that missed kick. But it's costly. But at the same time, if Pollard comes back, there's that catch-22. You don't get the same attacking game. You do get the point scoring, and that's something you've discussed quite well. It's a weird one now for South Africa, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very difficult dilemma for South Africa. So I think quickly on the like field kicking or territorial kicking, I think you can go through pretty much all 46 players that played. I think most of them played really well. And yeah, like also all the counterparts all matching up against each other. But I thought Faf de Klerk's box kicking was close to exceptional most of the time. And my only wish was that South Africa used that weapon a bit more, because we were getting a bit of traction with, you know, contested high balls and yeah, just putting a bit more pressure onto the Irish and getting those contestable kicks. So it says that we kicked, like in terms of like the number of possessions that we had, we only kicked the ball in 46% of our possessions, whereas Ireland kicked 59% of the time. And you know, those things matter in terms of winning the territory battle. So Ireland had 53% territory, which I think a lot of the reason was them kicking quite smartly, especially in the second half. I think I think the direction was quite clear once halftime happened, that Sexton and James Lowe were told, look, let's try to play as much rugby as possible in the Springboks half. So I think, though, with regards to field kicking, just another point is that Manie Libbok's field kicking, I think, was also quite good. And especially his penalty kicks for like going to touch. I don't know if there's another fly half that gets as much meters as he does. I think he gets close to 50 meters. And it's the fact that he can kick from left and right, and he just is able to get every last meter. Like when you compare it to what Sexton was doing, Sexton was kicking it safe and he got like 20 or 30 meters, which is fine. Libbok, like in that final penalty for that final lineout, got 40 odd, maybe close to 50 meters. So it is a really good quality that he has. And I think I wish the Springboks just kicked a bit more. And obviously that's something that they have to look at, because it does seem like the Springboks are trying to play a bit more of a wide ball in hand type of game plan, which I think bit us in the butt in some cases with the Irish, especially with their defense and counterattacking and turnovers. The place kicking, it's been a fun conversation on Twitter the last 16 or so hours.
I'm sure it's been very fun.
Well, look, the main thing is Manie Libbok kicking well from the tee? No. What are the reasons for that? I think partly Libbok doesn't have the best kicking technique in the world. There's people that know a lot better that say he's a hooker of a kicker. So I'm sure people that play golf, you know, I'm very much of a hooker with my swing myself, so I can completely understand that. So he needs to almost stand in a bit of a different way that other kickers need to do. And I think another factor is that he's not really doing well with the shot clock. So I think he has a long routine. He does a lot of like swings and all that sort of stuff. And I think by the time he gets into it, and the fact that the shot clock starts, you know, when the penalty is given, or, you know, when the try is scored, or whatever the case is, if it's a penalty, we have to first look on top there for the red light to know if we're doing a kick or not, which I think is also a little bit of a factor in just delaying things as well. Then it's okay, we decide to kick, then the tee comes on, then Libbok starts with his routine, and he's always constantly kicking at like the last few seconds. And it's always, I feel like he almost has to rush the last few parts of his kicking routine. So I do think that's also a factor as well. Another factor is that South Africa, for whatever reason, doesn't have a kicking coach in their squad. When Rassie Erasmus was asked as to why he's not using the Stormers kicking coach, for example, the one that Manie Libbok uses, Razi said then we'd have to get specialist coaches for all positions and for all players. So then we'd have 33 specialist coaches for each player, which obviously is ridiculous. But yeah, I think South Africa put themselves in this position by only having Lebok as their only recognized fly half and pretty much the only recognized goal kicker in the squad before Handré Pollard came. So then when the Marks injury happened, it was basically a coin toss of, do we want a specialist too, or do we want a goal kicker, or at least some extra protection? And they chose the goal kicking. I mean, I think we'll talk about the bomb squad and stuff later. I think that has its own consequences. But yeah, I think it's clear that Manie Lebok did not perform well enough with his goal kicking. And unfortunately, as the goal kicker, he has to take, fall on his sword in that case, in terms of probably he won't be I don't think he'll be starting in the quarterfinal if we get there. So it's a matter of if Pollard can prove his fitness against Tonga, can get through that game, can show that he's at least fit, then I think he's going to be playing at number 10 from now on. But now this brings a lot of questions as to what that means for the Springboks, because the Springboks have started becoming a bit more of a possession-based team that goes wide, that plays off 10, that has looked a bit more expansive when Handré Pollard got injured last year. And then it was first Damian Willemse, then Manie Lebok became the fly-halves. And maybe it was going to happen anyway, but I think the coaches saw the opportunity to go, look, these people are a lot more, they're better passers than Pollard, they're a bit more expansive, they have a better running game than Pollard. Let's try to be a bit more expansive with our running game now. So let's put Lebok in, let's play off 10 a lot more. There's some stats that we have here that say like the Springboks, they played a lot wider than Ireland did, which I think for most people who would have been, thinking about the game before, you would expect Ireland to be the one playing wide and the Boks playing tight. So the Springboks had, 20% of their possessions were out wide and 46% of them were in the midfield. So that's 66% of your possessions are away from like that 9-10 channel. It's basically Lebok or Willemse have to pass to, the midfield, or pot of forwards, whatever the case is. And Pollard he's not the best passer in the world. I think that's probably the best way to put it. Like, he's a good passer. He can obviously do short passes. He does struggle with long passes. So for example, the long pass that Lebok had for Ches and Colby, does Pollard do it? I'm not sure. So there's a very big trade-off here that the Springboks have to consider as to how do the Springboks play if Pollard's number 10. I don't think we can play exactly the way that we play now. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe the Springboks will sort of, go to a lot more of a conservative game plan for a knockout rugby, which is fine. Pollard obviously is well experienced in knockout rugby and he's great at that. But that then also means we're a lot more predictable. And for the likes of Ireland and France, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to know that, okay, we don't have to worry about the wide threat. We don't have to worry about, these nice long bridging passes that Lebok does usually. We just have to worry about the 9 channel and one-off runners and all that sort of stuff. So then there's that consequence. There's also then a reserve consequence. Do we have Lebok, or either if Lebok or Pollard starts, do we have the other fly half on the bench just so that we have a change of plan in terms of either we need someone to kick goals or we need someone to, spark the attack? What does that mean for Villiers Leroux? What does that mean for Damian Willemse? Do we go 5-3? I think we should go 5-3. But yeah, obviously the Springboks are very committed to, having as many forwards as possible. So there's a lot of consequences. And yeah, it's a weird place for a team that's, a big contender in the World Cup. There's a lot of questions that we have about our 23 and our game plan. That usually is not a situation in which a team is in if they win the World Cup. And no, I know from 2007 and from 2019, we usually know who our 23 is, know how we're going to play, and we pretty much just execute that. So I think those are not good signs that we could be changing a fly half. We could be pretty much changing a game plan. We could be changing goal kickers and all that sort of stuff. And the final point is that, look, Pollard has his off days. So there's pretty much a big debate on South African Rugby Twitter about, obviously, Pollard must come in. He's a better goal kicker. No one denies that. But yeah, Pollard can have a few stinkers as well where he just, I don't know if it's a concentration thing or whatever, but he's not as consistent as Thomas Ramos or Emiliano Boffelli. So it's also not a done deal that he gets all those kicks. Like when you see where the kicks were taken, I think there was only one real easy kick from the 4 kicks that were missed by the box. The one that was in the 22, the other ones were either quite far or at an angle. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like there's a lot of hope that basically in that Tonga game, should Pollard start, that he has to get running as soon as possible. And he's only played 30 minutes of a game in the last 4 months. So yeah, there's a lot of questions now for the Springboks.
It's a big question at that, because you're asking a lad who, like, not even just playing 30 minutes, he played 30 minutes of a preseason game of Premiership sides who were even rotated out of that. Like it's not a high standard. So like he really needs to hit the ground running. But then, there's this fact, as we said, Libok, really good in attack. Kicking has been iffy. Pollard, he's not as good of an attacker. And there's so many questions, because South Africa, as we've said before, they've progressed into this on-ball type team. Libok is a big reason for that. And Jim, we'll come to you next, because I want to talk about Ireland's attack anyway, and it's a nice way to move on to it. Like, it felt like in the main, yeah, they were shut down to a degree, because South Africa have this incredible blitz defense. Ireland didn't have as much time on the ball, slower ruck speeds, etc., but still felt like it was a pretty good display, all things considered, with ball in hand.
Yeah, no, I thought the real kind of point of difference that Ireland have demonstrated in recent times, even in games against teams like Romania, is their phase play attack. They seem to be very, very big fans of stringing multiple passes together, tip in passes out wide. They seem to like to keep the ball moving a lot. It seems to be effective, very good at keeping the defense on their toes. I was very concerned going into this game about South Africa's scramble defense, because I do remember that from November. It makes it very difficult to get those passes off. I actually thought, though, in this game that it fired very well. There was the first attack I'm thinking of was on about 12 or 13 minutes. Ireland string a couple of passes together, then Gary Ringrose splits it out wide, and Hugo Keenan just absolutely sprints forward. And if not for a very good last minute scramble tackle, Keenan's over there. So I thought in that game it'd be easy to look at the scoreline and think that, okay, both sides kind of defense was the name of the game on the day, and I think it was, but I really think scramble defense was the name of the game on the day, because I thought for Ireland, yes, but even for South Africa, I thought they both had some runs of good attack, but it was just the last tackle was made every time, and the only times they scored tries were when the defense was drawn in tight enough that you could send a winger over, basically unopposed. Both Hansen and Colby for their tries didn't have to go past anyone to get their scores. So I thought overall, watching the game back, the phase play from Ireland was as good as it ever was, but South Africa's scramble defense was just phenomenal, as Ireland's had to be in response.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
So I thought for as low scoring a game as it was, the attack was still scintillating. It was really, really thrilling to watch. So I think if anything coming out of that game, the one takeaway I would have is that it was a testament to the defense of both teams that they only managed to score a try against each other, because the attack was really good.
Yep. Thala, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, very quickly. I think Ireland learned a lot from their game in 2022 against the Boks. I think in 2022, they're trying to go too wide. And I think we've all seen that interview that Jim Hamilton had with Ron O'Gara, where he was talking about you have to go through a rush defense and not go around it.
Yeah.
And Ireland, I think, we're trying to go through it in the going around it in the last game. And then the second half, they adjusted, and then they started getting a bit more forward ball as they were, doing passes inside and all that sort of stuff. And in this game, what they said is that we're going to be patient. We're going to set ourselves up. We're going to make sure we retain the ball in a ruck, and we're going to attack as narrow as possible. I don't think I've ever seen we know that Hansen and Lowe pop up everywhere, but I don't think they ever really were on their wings. Like they pretty much in the midfield or close to a ruck, and all of the Irish moves and the intricate patterns, everything happened quite close or very close to where the rucks were. So I think it's a big credit to Ireland that they won a game where they had no ruck speed. They even had less 3-second rucks than the Springboks had. They had an average ruck speed of like 4.5 seconds, which is an eternity for the Irish side.
About a second and a half more than prior to the first two games. Granted, the first two games not great opponents, but it's the highest of the year anyway.
So it's a big credit to Ireland that they were able to almost win this way. I mean, yeah, Rassie in Chasing the Sun talks about playing in the gutters, and Ireland showed that they can win a gutter fight or a street fight or whatever you want to call it. They really played a game that isn't really their natural game, and they still were able to beat the Springboks almost in their own game, arguably.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, and that's something that impresses us about this Irish team. They find a way, they problem solve really well. Like that 250 odd meters made is by far their lowest of the year, but they get the job done. And you could be cynical and say, well, Gibson Park needs to start learning how to direct these slower games. You know, kind of, I felt like his performance mirrored his Champions Cup final performance, which was 6-7 out of 10, but nothing else. Do you know that? And that's fine. But you know, you would prefer if he learns from it. And David, you want to jump in there before I move on?
Yeah, no, just to piggyback on what Thala said. Like the last pass for Mac Hansen's try was James Lowe. You know, Hansen goes over on the right wing, and it's Lowe who's the final pass there to get it over. So, those two are just interchangeable with other positions on the field, and I think that really adds to Ireland's defense because they can basically be whatever the attack needs them to be.
And that physicality through the midfield, it's becoming a point of difference. Like we spoke before the World Cup ad nauseum. What if Hugo Keenan gets injured? How do Ireland manage? You know, he's our best fullback. But Lowe and Hansen have been really, really good the last 3-4 games. You probably include the England game at that, where they've been coming in off their wings. They've been powerful. Like Lowe winning a breakdown turnover in the first half. Like that's huge. You know, that is huge psychologically as well. That it, you know, by the time Caelan Doris gets the ruck, the ball is won, and he came up with those big moments. And probably someone, if we were talking about going through the squad as a whole, he'd be someone who'd be one of the best rated. And we spoke before we came on about the subs and how important that was, and we'll get Thala's view on the bomb squad and all that in a minute. But we'll just to start with Ireland, and it was really impressive, wasn't it? Like you look at Dan Sheehan, I felt like he did well because he's Dan Sheehan. I don't think he did much better than Ronan Gallagher. I felt like he had a good game, but Sheehan was really good. Thought Beelum, as Thala mentioned earlier, locked out really well against Ox and Che. He managed to get in lower than Furlong could against Ox, who likes to get in low, and it put him under serious pressure. Henderson really steadied things. I feel like Conor Murray was probably at his best, and you know, Robbie Henshaw got 2 stints in the game of 10 minutes each, and he was really, really sharp in them. And someone mentioned, if you watch back the Bundy Aki clip, he actually jumps over one of the South African players on the ground who falls trying to tackle Bundy Aki and just jumps him nice and clean like a steeplechase. And it was a really good display. Stephen, I might just get your thoughts on it as well, because it felt like, we keep saying this Irish 23 is probably better than ever. They've got game changers on the bench. They've got lads who can see at home. But just the fact that we spent all week talking about the South African bench and the likes of Ian Henderson, Conor Murray, the old guard, then, you know, Robbie Henshaw, Jack Crowley, granted Robbie Henshaw isn't as young, Jack Crowley, Dan Sheehan, Finlay Beelum, guys with less caps were absolutely integral to Ireland getting the job done that last 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think Irish teams of the past, there has been a bit of a talent gap from that starting 15 to the bench. That just is gone now. Like in this year alone, you know, the gap between Furlong and any other tight end was huge. Now it's not. Finlay Beelum is more than capable of coming in and having a stellar performance. Having Dan Sheehan on the bench obviously is an absolute luxury. Obviously, he's only coming back into form, but the players coming onto the pitch probably feel in their head that they should be starting the game. And that's the level of talent, and also they're coming on with such a belief and an attitude of like, there's no fear in the players coming on the pitch, which is huge, and that's has to be said. It's a huge tick in the box for Andy Farrell and his psychology and what he's done with this team and turned them into the mentally, a mentally strong team like that we were never ever before. We all know that we've lost games in the past because we didn't show up, we shot ourselves in the foot, and this team just does not do that. And when you don't beat yourself, this Irish team is incredibly hard to beat. And we saw that last night, with just how South Africa played quite well and still couldn't get it over the line. Now, obviously, we talked about the kicking woes, but the level of talent and the cohesion among the group, like I've been guilty of the past of saying we need more rotation, we need to get newer guys in here to the squad, but this is why you don't necessarily do that. This is why Andy Farrell tends to pick the same players over and over again, because they know each other in and out. They trust each other, which is a huge thing at that level. And that's what we said before with Sexton. The confidence that Sexton gives the players around him is huge. And that's not necessarily there with the likes of Joey Carberry in the past, with the likes of Jack Carty in the past. Crowley obviously still so young but so talented, but these lads trust each other. They will, they'll go to battle for each other. And that's, again, all down to probably Andy Farrell and the coaching staff, but also the cohesion that they've built over the past 3 or 4 years.
No, absolutely. You've nailed it there. And you see someone, Beelum is a prime example. Beelum was out of favour at the start of Farrell's reign, got a game at Lucid Prop. He didn't play well in it. He missed out in the next squad because they were looking at O'Toole. In the long term, Porter was still playing tight head. And now you could make a case that Finlay Beelum is one of the most important players in the Irish squad, because what he's doing when he comes off the bench is just, it's the definition of next man up, get the job done. And Tadhg Furlong isn't that his career best form? Which is fair to say, and we probably judge him unfairly against that. But to have someone like Beelum coming on and doing what he did, to have someone like Conor Murray, Ian Henderson, with all their experience, to be doing what they're doing, over 300 professional games, like it's huge. And on the flip side, as we said, probably way too much last week about the South African bomb squad, the 7-1. It was talked about, but I don't want to be disrespectful here, Thala. Like, I don't want to say that they didn't perform, because they were good, but with the exception of probably Orge Snyman, you could argue none of them really came on and made the big impact that they probably should have. Oxenjay had 2 very good scrums, and Beelum come on and it leveled out again. So it's probably not what Razzie and Jack Nienaber would have wanted when they went with the forward dominant bench.
Yeah, I think you're being, I think that point is maybe a little bit slightly unfair to, I think, the performance of the players. So the players that played in their normal positions, I think, did add an impact. We saw with Oxenchair Trevin Yakane, they won some scrum penalties, and then Snyman and John Klein, your old friend, they did really well with the set piece. I think there was no issues there. Van Staden and Quagga Smith, I think Quagga, I have a lot of time for him, and he was just absolutely, the South Africans clearly in the second half said, okay, Ireland's disrupting our rucks, we can play that game, and Quagga just came in like a wrecking ball in the rucks. So the issue is, do we need all 7 people to do that? Probably not. So I can't see that. I don't think that the 7-1 split makes sense, especially when we don't have a recognized second choice hooker. So it even makes it worse that we are putting all these forwards on and we're adding risk in terms of obviously backline replacements. And, we don't even have a recognized hooker coming on as well. So if maybe this was Bonambi coming on for Marks in the second half, and then it's the new pack with Bonambi in it as well, that has a bit more of an impact. That is kind of how it worked in that New Zealand game. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is and maybe this was part of the whole, at least there's let's say 20% or 10% of South Africans think that this loss was done on purpose and it's all part of Rassie's plan and all that sort of stuff. But if that is the case, them subbing off Khaleesi and Etzebeth, especially like before the 50-minute mark, that's probably not something I would advise they do in the future as well. So like I would, especially with Etzebeth, and I mean both with Khalees and Etzebeth, those two need to play close to 60 odd minutes, and then you can just like blood in the bomb squad as they come on as well. So I think that's also a concern as to timing, because it's no, I mean, yes, we have two quality packs basically, but there's certain players that are above, either they're like world class or even above that level, if you can say that. So they should try to stay in big decisive games as long as possible as well. So then there's that concern as well. So, when we finished the game, we had Nche, Fourie, Nyekane, Snyman, Klein, Kwacha, Peter Steph du Toit, and Van Staden. I mean, for Ireland, you look at that, and that's why I admired what Andy Farrell said about the bomb squad. There's not something to be that concerned about, because I mean, Beelan can match Ox, sort of. Sheehan obviously can definitely match whatever we have at hooker. Henderson can sort of match what the likes of Klein and Snyman do as well. Like it's not like you have this big advantage, especially with the best teams in the world. So now we add to this that we possibly going to change our fly halves, and the question then becomes, do we not need at least 2, if not 3 reserve spots for our backline? Because my ideal lineup for the Springboks, if Pollard starts, is that Leroux's at fullback, because Leroux basically helps the attack and helps with the deficiencies that Pollard has. And then I think then in the second half, if we're chasing a game, or even if we're being defensive, Willems is the perfect player 23, because if we try to defend, then you put him on for Leroux, and he can defend and all that sort of stuff. If we need to attack, you can even put him on a 12 and maybe take out someone like Dialendi or Creel, have Leroux there, and then also have Libok as a possible option to spark the attack if we need to chase a game. Because I don't think there'll be much chasing of a game if Pollard and Willems are playing 10 and 15, because they're not really the best playmakers in the world. Like Willems, who I thought had a fantastic game. I think he was probably, if not the best, the second best backline player for the Springboks. But he attacks for himself. He is good at creating opportunities for himself. He's not really the playmaker like someone like Mike Hudson is, for example. And there's a big difference there. So I think there's a lot of questions now for Rassie and Jacques. I don't think we'll see 7-1 again. I think they saw the limitations of it, especially when we don't really have as much quality, obviously, with our hooker now, and there's a bit of diminishing returns with regards to it, and you want to keep some of your best players on the field as long as possible. And seeing that, apart from that maybe 10 minutes period in the 50 to 60 minutes where Sark we're starting to win scrum penalties and put pressure on Ireland, the thing that will be, I think, a big mark against the whole strategy was Ireland countered that. They absorbed the pressure. They were going back. It seemed like the game was swinging towards South Africa. They just fought back when they put on their reserves, and when Beelan came on, and Henderson was great with the line out, and Baird came on as well. So Ireland can counter this. We know that France can counter this because they'll have probably a 6-2 bench of their own. So I don't think there's much of a point on going 7-1, maybe 6-2. But now with the Pollard issue or the goal kicking issue, we might even have to investigate going 5-3, which after all this talk in the last few weeks seems quite bland, actually.
Yeah, it seems a bit too normal, considering everything that has been said, about the morals and all that. And just to pick up on one of the points you made, probably a lot of the reason why the subs may not have stood out was Khaleesi was really impressive. Etzebeth was really impressive. And sometimes it's very easy to get drawn into, especially when you're not following Van Staden or Smith or whoever. It's very easy to be drawn into, well, how did the guy that they replaced play? And Khaleesi was brilliant. And maybe that just makes Quadra Smith not look as good, by virtue of that. And the same with Etzebeth, and like Etzebeth and Klein don't play the same game, but that's probably why Snyman stood out, because he had that more dynamic performance. And just before we round things off, Stephen, this was a huge win, a huge performance, but on the grand scale, grand scheme of things, like Ireland, it doesn't feel like this is them peaked. That's one side of it. And it feels like they're only building, they're growing, they're going to get huge confidence out of this. No injuries last night, remarkably. Maybe Josh van der Fleer might have a finger issue, but that probably won't be anything serious. But it just feels like this win, the confidence, the hype, and the buzz around the country last night. It feels like we're on the brink of something special, but there's always that fear factor. Well, we're still going to have to play New Zealand in Paris if we are going to get over our quarterfinal hoodoo.
Yeah, there's a certain, you can look at it probably a couple of ways. Yeah, like, okay, we won a group game. We still have to probably beat Scotland to guarantee, good qualification. So that hasn't changed really in any sense. So purely in a rugby sense, no, nothing really has changed. It's just as I think it's all psychological. It's all kind of the aura and the mindset around this team, and even the view of this team. We know this team has been good. We know we've had good teams in the past, but there's just something different about this team. And Andy Farrell will be, talking to these players and saying, like, but that wasn't, as you said, that wasn't Ireland's A game. Ireland have played a lot better in games up to this. But you've proved that you can win a game that goes into the trenches. That's an absolute, a bar brawl. You can score one try and still beat South Africa. That's probably not something we would have said a while ago. You would have to score a couple of tries to even have a chance. Defensively, you matched them, toe for toe, blow for blow, and you proved that you can probably defend any team in the world. And again, it's like we knew that they could beat South Africa. We knew that they could beat New Zealand, down New Zealand, all that. But you have to see it first. You have to do it first, and then it becomes, then it becomes reality. And it's just now, again, Ireland should fear no team now. I genuinely think South Africa, to me, was the scariest team left in this competition. I'm not saying France are not scary or New Zealand are not scary, but the way they play, the way it matches up against our kind of style, it's terrifying. So to go and beat them, as I said, in an absolute kind of a bar brawl of a game, and come out on top, it's huge. It's a huge boost going into that Scotland game, and then hopefully into a quarterfinal. Where again, why would you fear a New Zealand team now after beating South Africa, after beating New Zealand the last couple of times? It's more like Ireland are going in and out of the games being like, you have to beat us, rather than like, what do we have to do to beat these guys? And that is a huge momentum swing when it comes to these games. From South Africa point of view, again, nothing really, like, if you play that game 10 times, South Africa probably win five of those games. Like, you know what I mean? You make two of those kicks that you missed and you come out on top, and that's the margins it is. So there's no point in getting too down the dumps about it from South Africa point of view. They'll still qualify, and again, no team wants to see them in quarterfinal or onwards. So South Africa, they're not going to be too. They're obviously disappointed, but this doesn't change how dangerous they are and how much of a threat they are down the road. It just was nice to get one over on them in the group games at least.
Yeah, but it always is to get a big scalp, and it was the first World Cup game between Ireland and South Africa, so that's Ireland have 100% record against South Africa in World Cups. There's always that side of things to it, and
let's hope we don't play them again. Let's hope we don't see them in the final.
30 years or something, just so we can, 32 even. But before we finish up, we should say, like, the group is not over yet. You can look at it whichever way you want, but personally, I think Scotland having to play twice against Tonga and Romania and having to perform before they play us is going to be, I feel like that's it's a big factor that probably should be talked about. I feel like South Africa will just go out and they'll get the job done against Tonga, regardless. I can't see them slipping up there, to be honest. So if Ireland win, they'll top the pool. South Africa will probably take second with a try bonus point result over Tonga next Sunday. So starting with yourself, David, the consensus before the tournament was Ireland or South Africa, whoever won that game will come first, and whoever lost that game will come second. Are you still sticking by that as we head into the last 2 weeks of the pool stages?
Well, given that there's spoiler, it's 20 minutes gone, the Scotland-Tonga game, and Tonga are currently winning. I think that's probably it's 10-7. Tonga just scored a lovely try. I think that's likely. Scotland, there was a lot of complaints from Ireland well, at least I know there's a lot of complaints from myself and people I know about the draw and the nature of how early before the actual tournament the draw is made, and the fact that we ended up with the 5 top ranked teams in the world in just 2 pools. I think the real victims of that were not Ireland or South Africa or France or New Zealand. They were Italy and Scotland. Scotland in particular, the 5th ranked team in the world. Are they on a level with the top 4? Probably not. You'd probably favor any of the top 4 against them, but they're a very good team, and you have to imagine if they were in Pool C or Pool D, they'd probably top them. That being said, I don't think Scotland have beaten Ireland home or away since 2017.
They'll have to win by denying us a bonus point more than likely, and they haven't done that in over 20 years.
Yeah, and like the way Ireland play, a team like New Zealand were really the perfect foil to Ireland's attack. I cannot see a world. I can't see a world in which Ireland don't win that game, but there's definitely not a world in which Ireland don't score 4 tries. And if Scotland win by more than 7 points, I'd be very, very shocked. So I think Scotland are a little bit goosed, irrespective of anything else. So I would expect that. I mean, yeah, we might lose in top of the pool, but I would expect that Ireland will win that game and top the pool, and I would anticipate that South Africa will do a number on Tonga and finish second. It is funny, you want to be respectful of the teams, but I think both coaches are certainly. A lot of commentators online are already talking about South Africa v France and Ireland v New Zealand as if they're done deals. I would like to see Italy have some words to say about that when they face off against New Zealand. But yeah, for me right now, I can't imagine a scenario in which that's not the way that this pool pans out.
Yeah, well, not understandable at that. And Thala, we're kind of booking your ticket in to play France in that quarterfinal for you. We'll be kind like that over here. But do you think it is going to be Ireland top, South Africa second, and that showdown with France? And if that is what you're thinking, would you back South Africa to take France in the quarterfinal?
Yes, I think it's going to be Ireland versus Ireland and South Africa, number 1 and number 2. Yeah, I don't think surprises usually happen when 2 Six Nations teams or 2 rugby championship teams face each other. Like in World Cups, that usually just basically follows form. And as you guys have mentioned, Ireland has great form against Scotland. So I can't, as David said, it's either, they lose by within 7 and don't allow them to get a bonus point or whatever the case is. I can't see it all falling to pieces in a dramatic way. Then your question about, about the quarterfinal against France. So obviously there's a big cheekbone in the room with Antoine Dupont and his status and whether he's going to be available for the quarterfinal. I am going to assume he's going to be available. I'm assuming that, depending on obviously the seriousness of the injury, he's had a plate inserted into his face. If he can see, pretty much, if he can see to 80%, I think he plays some role in the quarterfinal. So I'm assuming that Dupont plays. I'm assuming that France will maybe have some dramas, but will be able to beat Italy. Especially if Aldrit and Marchand are all back, which they should be, then I think France beats Italy, and I think France is able to beat. Then if it's a quarterfinal and France are at close to full strength, I can't see France losing the quarterfinal. They're the ones hosting the party. I can't see them leaving their own party that early. And even, if Dupont's not there, obviously that changes the equation. But it would be typical France to lose their best player and to look like they have no hope, and then to at least produce a crazy performance against the Springboks and knock them out in the quarterfinal. And it seems like England would be on their side of the draw, then to lose to England in the semi-final. So, and Cooks, one of my compatriots in the Rugby Bits podcast, had this prediction that England's going to go to the final, which obviously we all laughed at before the World Cup. And now I kind of see the path, because England's on the same side as France. France have an injury. If France can take out South Africa without Dupont, and England faces France without Dupont, something crazy could happen. Bob's your uncle. It's England versus Ireland in a final. which I'm sure Ireland would love. So yeah, I can still see France. If France has Dupont, I think France are the favorites. Can South Africa win? Of course they could. But actually, interestingly enough, South Africa has doesn't have the best record in close games in the Jacques Nienaber era. So we've had 13 games that have ended within 7 points. South Africa's won 5 of those games and has lost 8, which is, I think it's partly because of conversion. We don't really convert our chances, be it through kicking or almost like relying on the ref to make a call with like a scrum or a rolling maul like we had yesterday, and not being able to sort of execute, an attack to get, a try if needed or whatever the case is. So I don't think there's a reason for France or Ireland to fear if they face the Springboks in a knockout game. The formula's there on beating the Springboks. If you can at least get parity up front, so get parity with your set pieces, and not leak any penalties, get under 10 penalties conceded, and match up to them in the rucks and the collision, there is a way of beating South Africa. So it's then just a matter of, there's the extra stuff of, does South Africa have a kicker? What is their bench composition? Is Leroux or whoever playing? Can they do that bit of magic? But there shouldn't be any reason for France and Italy to fear. I mean, Italy and Ireland to fear. Now, yeah, if France doesn't have Dupont, that's going to be very interesting. But yeah, South Africa should be the favorites, but I won't rule out that France, with obviously all the fans there, they still would have, if Marchand and Aldrit are there, have their best pack pretty much. Maybe Paul Willemse comes back into the team as well. They won't lose too much to South Africa in terms of what happens up front. They still have the best goal kick in the world. Maxime Luku's not a bad scrum off at all. He's pretty decent. I think there's definitely a way for France to still win that game.
No, there probably is. David, do you want to jump in there? You're on mute there, David. Sorry.
I am on mute. Sorry, just wanted to pause the question. I don't know if anyone here would know the answer because none of us are from France, but I have a sneaking suspicion that France might slightly be ruining yesterday's results. I don't know if it's just me, but does anyone else get the sense that they would have rather
I feel like they have a
faced?
better chance against Ireland in the quarterfinal, yeah.
I feel they have a much better. Now, to be fair, I was checking the listings because I was curious. They have only played South Africa once since before 2019. So and admittedly South Africa did win that one. It was in Marseille, but I don't know. I have a sneaking suspicion that now South Africa are just a good foil to most teams. They're tough motherfuckers. Sorry, but I have a sneaking suspicion that France are ruined that a little bit. I think they would have preferred to take Ireland.
Yeah, I think they would have as well, to be honest. And it's a lot of that is because, well, Ireland's record in Paris is poor. Let's call a spade a spade. It is poor, but then France will rue Dupont getting injured as well, and
combine that with our quarterfinal record,
and like personally, I think I had the belief that if France were going to get caught, it would come before the final. So I felt like final Stade de France, it would just be too much for a lot of teams. At the moment, maybe there's a case to be made that they've shown enough nerves that there could be a nervous final in them as well. And, maybe South Africa, as Thala said, maybe they get the job done, but it's probably more of a coin flip game more than anything else, really. And yeah, Thala, do you want to jump in there to close it out?
Yeah, my theory has always been that I think South Africa actually has a better chance in the final than they would in a quarterfinal against France. I think there's the final almost evens out sort of the crowd factor, because obviously the crowd will be almost as nervous as probably the players are. And we know how the French crowd can get, obviously, if things go against them. And I think, France I don't think France would be that unhappy if they lose like at a final. It wouldn't be the end of the world, if I can put it like that. So there might be a bit of okay, this is fair enough if we lose to the Springboks. If it's not like England or Ireland or whatever. So yeah, my theory has always been if the Springboks win the World Cup, it's hopefully with New Zealand facing them in the quarterfinal and not France, which is why the loss yesterday, I think, could be let's not say fatal yet, but yeah, it could make things it makes things a lot more difficult for the Springboks, because I'm not sure if they can beat France in the quarterfinal.
Well, I think it's credit to all the teams as well that Ireland would fear South Africa or France or New Zealand. They respect, like, not overwhelming fear, but they respect them. And the same goes for all four teams. I think it's credit to where they're at. I know you said maybe England could get to a final, but yeah, they'd have to overturn a 43-point loss to France earlier on in the year. I understand Henry Arundel is the second coming of Jesus Christ after scoring 5 tries yesterday, but I don't think they're that good now at the moment. Stephen, I'll finish things with yourself. Certainly the consensus is Ireland to beat Scotland and so on. You're already saying you're heading over to the quarterfinals, so you're probably already thinking, okay, let's get that win. Let's beat Scotland and become in confident. Because I won't be chatting to you before then on the pod, how do you see it unfolding for Ireland over the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I just don't think Scotland are good enough. Unfortunately, I think they're
Yes.
a decent team, but I'm sorry. I've never feared. Literally since the game where Hogg dropped that ball over the line where they should have beaten us, I think since then they just have this mental block with Ireland, and I just don't think they're good enough. It's all about Finn Russell with them. If you can stop him or negate him to a certain degree, I just don't think they have enough. And Ireland don't fear them even a little bit. So I think they'll beat them. I think South Africa will finish second, and yeah, we'll play New Zealand in the quarterfinals, which I think we. I think again personally going into the game, I would have rather played France just for the atmosphere. I think the atmosphere would have been incredible, but I do think we have a better chance beating New Zealand than France, especially in Paris. So I think that's yeah. But regarding Scotland and the remaining group games, yeah, I just don't think Scotland. You can clip this, Scottish fans, if you want, and play it to me in 2 weeks' time. But as of now, the only nightmare situation is Ben Healy coming on kicking a penalty to win it, because I have talked so much shit about Ben Healy in Munster and now Scotland. So that's the worst case scenario for me, but I just don't see it happening.
It's a miracle I let you on this podcast, to be
I know,
honest.
it really is, Bill.
But no, I'm of a similar belief about Scotland. I think when they beat us, I'll be afraid of them then, but they haven't shown that they can, and that's they've beaten France when there's no pressure on them, and they've beaten England because they rise to that game. They haven't beaten Ireland, and kind of like this. I felt the same about the South Africa game. They don't beat South Africa, so why would they have beaten them in Marseille? And South Africa laid out a great blueprint as to how to stop them as well in that game, and I still can't get past the sense that I think South Africa will win the World Cup and they'll beat us in the final, even still. But I hope not. I hope we can. If we do get a replay between the two teams, it will be a cracker. If last night was anything to go by. And I suppose that's what we have time for today, lads. And thank you very, very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to talk about a great Irish performance. Maybe not for Thala, but it's been a great to have you on and to give your perspective on things as well, mate. It's always good to hear the outside perspective on these games. And for those listening at home, I'll be back on Monday night with our flagship recap pod as we look back at the other 7 games, which includes, of course, Scotland Tonga, which we mentioned here, the France and Namibia game, and the big showdown which comes tonight as we record between Wales and Australia, with so many storylines surrounding Australia at the moment, and Eddie Jones, as they always seem to do. As always, thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to lads for coming on. And if you do like what you see here from myself or from the lads, you can find the links to all our channels, including the Rugby Bits podcast and the Master of None podcast. That'll be tagged in the description. But for now, and until next time, take it easy.